to the American people that we are enforcing them. When the people think enforcement is not working, then we create immigration reform legislation in Congress, and in that legislation we sneak in all kinds of things like amnesty and the real ID.
Rather than rely on getting the real ID passed through the immigration reform, David, we will make it separate legislation and get that passed first. We will advertise it as a means of protecting Americans from terrorism by creating a federal identity document that everybody will need in order to fly on commercial airlines and enter government buildings, open a bank account, and other common activities. But it would actually be part of our clever strategy to get Americans into an international database via their state driver's license. Good idea, huh, David?
And by leaving the borders open, they won't have any idea who anybody is. So we sell the American people our solution, which is to give everyone an ID containing their biometric information. That way, they'll think they're safe from terrorists. And after they get the ID, it will be easier to get them to accept a microchip implant. That chip will be the realization of our dreams, the ultimate control of every human being. If anyone rebels, we can simply turn his chip off, and he won't be able to do anything. Buy food, buy gas, get a job, travel, he will become a non-person.
We've got to get the real ID implemented. It's essential for the North American Union to work.
Henry, what else would we do to create a North American Union?
Well, David, the Soviet-Russian threat of the Cold War didn't work very well. So instead of creating the fear of nuclear attack, we could promote trade agreements that we could sell to people on the appearance of improving trade, like we did in Europe. But of course, these would be agreements that we would manage and regulate, not the free market system. We would control the pricing, the supplies, labor, and capital, and have our own little monopoly. But we would call them free trade agreements so people would think they were free market driven.
Not only that, Henry, but these free trade agreements would eliminate the tariff and excise taxes that support the government. So more and more of that source revenue will have to come from personal income taxes. And naturally, our corporations will prosper. The EU is a good model, but it took too long. We have to move much faster in North America.
Uncontrolled immigration will help accelerate the process. Furthermore, we would have to arrange for legislation to be written that makes these agreements do these things, but in such a way that it's not obvious.
We could make it very long, hundreds of pages, or even thousands, so they would need more time to read it.
Well, that, we could just make sure the legislators have only a day or two to read it before voting, so they can't really study it.
Of course, we can do the usual bribing, arm twisting, and fast tracking to get the bills into law.
So when the governments of North America pass legislation, David, their countries would become signatories to these agreements and therefore legally bound to them. Then we can start driving the market toward cheap labor to lower costs. So when the big corporations we control sell their goods at retail, we all make billions instead of mere millions. Oh, and we would also want to make sure the media covers it in such a way so that our true intentions were never revealed to the general public.
It won't work without the media throwing people off the scent, Henry. So it's going to cost us millions to make these deals. And all the while, the massive migration of illegals flooding into our true target, the United States, will be destroying that country through multiculturalism, cheap labor, and the higher costs such uncontrolled immigration brings.
That's a hypothetical conversation, of course, but it shows the arrogance of the globalists and how they think. They use free trade agreements to remove tariffs that support government, thus shifting the bulk of support to working Americans. So those who work for a living bear the greatest tax burden, while the globalists who create money out of thin air and their multinational corporations make out like bandits, which of course they are. World-class thieves with only a lust for money and power, and not a speck of respect or compassion for the rest of mankind.
With excessive government taxation and regulation to force smaller companies to outsource or move offshore, and with increased imports of cheap goods not subject to the same level of socialistic taxes and regulations, America is losing its ability to produce and is moving closer to becoming dependent on foreign countries for basic resources. And with competition from low-wage nations such as Communist China, millions of jobs have been lost for Americans, but gained for cheaper imported workers.
Dick, the manufacturing sector has been the foundation for the middle class for millions of Americans. But thanks to NAFTA and other free trade agreements, U.S. manufacturing has been decimated and is taking the middle class down with it. For every one manufacturing job that is lost, several other dependent jobs are lost with it.
The National Defense Magazine described the effect of the depletion of the U.S. industrial base to its August 2003 issue. It has made the United States so dependent on foreign countries for critical components and systems that it may have lost its ability to control its supply chains. The United States is becoming dependent on countries such as China, India, Russia, France, and Germany for critical weapons technology. It's conceivable that one of these governments could tell its local suppliers not to sell critical components to the United States because they do not agree with U.S. foreign policy.
Dick, is this what we Americans wanted? Did we vote for NAFTA?
We did indirectly because our elected representatives voted for it.
But they're not representing the will of the people, are they?
Not at all.
And why are the media not keeping us properly informed of this deception?
Because they're part of the deception. Let's put everything we have said about the North American Union into focus. We keep mentioning that we will lose our sovereignty, Constitution, and Bill of Rights as though we are different from any other country. Well, we are different. We have the greatest nation the world has ever known. We have the greatest Constitution in the world. Millions of people have emigrated to the United States to enjoy the freedoms and opportunities we have and which are guaranteed by our Constitution.
That's right, Dick. But one word has popped up numerous times in our discussion of the NAU, and that is the word secret. Why do all these groups meet in secret? Why don't they bring their proposals to open meetings in Congress? And of course, the answer is that if they did, we would know their true agenda. They must circumvent the constitutional process and use deception to achieve their goals.
Another case in point is the third summit meeting of the Security and Prosperity Partnership we mentioned earlier that took place in Montebello, Quebec, Canada, in August 2007. Some 2,000 demonstrators showed up to demonstrate against the meeting. The Council of Canadians Action Group planned to hold a public forum the night before so that writers, academics, and parliamentarians could voice their concerns about the Security and Prosperity Partnership with Canadians. But Canadian police and the United States Army refused to allow a nearby municipality to rent a community center to the group. Here is a short clip that shows 3 demonstrators trying to goad others into throwing rocks. These 3 men were actually police officers, masquerading as demonstrators.
Hey, come on, brother. Take your mask off. No. Put the rock down, man. Put the rock down. Hey. Put the rock down. This is our line.
You can hear Union leader David Coles telling the men, "Put the rocks down. This is our line. This is a peaceful demonstration. Put the rocks down." Other protesters surround the 3 fake protesters and say, "Take off your masks. Let us see your face." To maintain their cover, the 3 men moved behind police lines, where they were arrested and taken away in handcuffs. But it was all for show. These men were agents provocateurs, using a time-honored technique to manufacture or manipulate public opinion. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police and Quebec's provincial police, known as SQ, who were handling security for the summit, at first denied that the 3 men were police officers. 3 days later, the SQ acknowledged the men were police officers, but said they did not act as agents provocateurs or criminals. But the video footage clearly shows that Quebec's provincial police are blatant liars. Rick, the United States government officials who attend such meetings and who are, quote, adhering to the enemies of the United States, unquote, are committing treason.
They are also violating the Logan Act, established by Congress in 1799.
Any citizen of the United States